Hey guys, Metal Jesus here, and today I am very excited to bring you a pickups video. But what's cool about this one is that it's a little bit different than what you normally see on YouTube. Recently, I picked up over 50 Commodore 64 games from one guy who's local. His name is Andy. Now, I know what you're thinking. Some of you are not into collecting, say, 80s PC games. Don't worry about it because this video has a ton of variety. I have adventure games, platform games, text adventures, arcade conversions, simulators. So much variety came out on the Commodore. I think you guys are gonna like this. It's not something you see every day. All right, let's take a look. All right, first up, let's check out Dan Dare, Pilot of the Future. Now, notice this is a flat record style box or packaging, which Electronic Arts did a lot back then. This is a really cool game. It's based on a comic book character that was very popular in the UK. We're gonna stick with these flat EA record style releases here. This is Sky Fox 2, obviously a sequel. Now this is a first-person space combat game. I love how when you open these up, it has a picture of the developers. And of course, even though they're flat, you still get all of the goodies you expect. I was also surprised to see that this is a Dynamics game. We used to publish Dynamics at Sierra. I had no idea. Here's a pretty cool top-down shooter that's similar to Raiden. This is by Taito. It's called Sky Shark. Now, there are actually two versions of this game. In Europe, they got it as Flying Shark. By the way, guys, I'm gonna go a little bit quicker than normal because I have so many games to get through. So if you have a question about a specific game, please post a comment down below. Here is an absolute classic, considered one of the must-owns on the Commodore 64. That, of course, is Seven Cities of Gold. Now, in this, you play as Christopher Columbus, and you're exploring the new world, but the map is randomly generated each time. In the game, you build forts and missions, you're gathering gold, and basically bringing more power to Spain. This is actually considered one of the very first games to be called edutainment. Here's a really cool game called Parallax by Mindscape. Notice it's not EA, but it's still using the flat packaging. Parallax is a top-down, multi-directional shooting game that was pretty popular at the time. Operation Wolf by Taito is an arcade conversion for the Commodore 64. Originally a rail shooter where you gun down enemies, but now check this out. You open it up and there's a really cool comic book in there. And speaking of comic books, many of you old school Commodore 64 fans will recognize Accolade's Comics. Think of this as a comic book come to life. You actually interact with characters, and then you also play action sequences in between. And when you open it up, it has really cool packaging. Next up, we have Nightmare on Elm Street by Monarch Software. This game is based on the original horror movie and is actually pretty hard to find. And I guess that's because the publisher had very limited distribution with this. So it's kind of rare and a little bit expensive. Many of you will recognize Platoon here by Data East. This game recreates elements of the popular 1980s Vietnam War movie, where you control one of 5 squad members. Here is another classic by Data East. Of course, this is Ikari Warriors. This is a vertical scrolling action shooter that was really popular in the arcades. I remember playing it a ton. Of course, you can't forget the sequel. This is Victory Road, but this time you're taking on aliens as well. Many people consider this one to be even tougher than the original game. One of my favorite books growing up was Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, and a lot of books got converted over into text adventures on the Commodore 64. This is one of those, and it's a great story. Again, it's based on Ray Bradbury's science fiction classic, but in this game, the twist is that books are illegal and firemen burn them for the government. Also growing up, I read a lot of Arthur C. Clarke, and of course, there had to be a version of Rendezvous with Rama in text adventure form on the Commodore. The story of this is that there is a giant asteroid heading towards Earth, and then when astronauts land on it, they actually discover that it's an ancient spaceship. Hacker 2: The Doomsday Papers. Now this is a real-time strategy game that is a sequel to the groundbreaking original by Activision. In this game, you play as a hacker breaking into a mainframe computer to save the world, and then you tap into different things like security cameras, robots, and a bunch more. Next up is Gauntlet 2 by Mindscape. This game is very similar to the original arcade version. You choose from 4 different D&D type characters, and you basically just try to stay alive as long as possible. It is a co-op classic. And of course, when you have a popular movie, you're gonna get cheesy movie tie-in games. Well, if you're thinking that this is gonna be somewhat faithful to the original version of Predator, sadly, you'd be wrong. Now, in this game, it's a side-scrolling platformer, but your teammates are already killed off, and then you battle things like scorpions, enemy soldiers, and also you take on the Predator multiple times. It just doesn't make any sense. Now check this out. As you can see, this is Lord of the Rings Game 1, but you'll notice that the packaging is huge. Why is it so big? Well, when you open it up, look, there's a massive novel inside. That's pretty cool, huh? Also, notice the game is on cassettes, which got me thinking because in the US, we didn't really have a lot of games released on cassette, but over in the UK, they definitely did. So I think a lot of these games I picked up in this lot are actually from Europe. As a nice bonus, I also got the trilogy version, which is just a compilation of all 3 books. Here's a game I did not even know about until I bought this lot, and that is The Staff of Karnath. Kind of a weird name. This is a 2D platformer, and look, it comes on cassette too. Next up is another game from Activision. This is Mind Shadow. This game is a graphic text adventure, and it doesn't have great graphics, but that's pretty typical of an early Commodore 64 game. But it does have some pretty cool packaging. Here is Zengi? I have no idea, but basically this is an action strategy game. Epix published some awesome games on the Commodore 64, but here's one I didn't even know about till I bought this. This is called Mind Roll. Here is a top-down maze game where you play as an eyeball trying to collect keys and other objects to complete the level. Moving right along, you have Revenge of Defender. Now, of course, Defender was a classic 80s arcade game, and this is the sequel. Now, in this update, you'll notice that there's more kind of detailed scrolling backgrounds, plus there's new enemies across all 7 levels. Lucasfilm was a developer that pushed the technology pretty hard in the early 80s, and they did some amazing stuff on the Commodore 64, and the Eidolon is no exception to that. Now, this is an early Commodore 64 game, but it's considered to be one of the very first first-person shooters ever made. The premise of the game is pretty easy. You move through caves, collecting and then also creating your own fireballs while battling various enemies. Again, it doesn't look like much today, but it was groundbreaking at the time. The original Impossible Mission was an absolute classic platforming game on the Commodore 64. I love even playing it today, and here is the sequel. Now, for some reason, I don't like the sequel as much as the first game, but it's still a really decent 2D platformer. These next 3 games all have something in common, and that is they use the Freescape 3D engine created by Incentive Software. Now, you have to remember, this is at a time when computers were just not powerful enough to do the math to do 3D engines properly. I mean, you'll notice here that the frame rate just crawls, but again, at the time, it was mind-blowing. You didn't see this on other systems. Most games never even attempted this. And so for that reason, it's really cool to have Driller, also Total Escape, and then finally Darkside in my collection. Next up is a late release on the Commodore 64, I believe 1989, and that is BattleTech: The Crescent Hawk's Inception. This is a top-down RPG where you battle futuristic robots, but what makes it really stand out are the more advanced graphics and also the more advanced gameplay. This is a fairly complex game, and you can tell that it is again, a late release for the system. And I always love when they include a big old poster in the box. Back in the 1980s, everybody was afraid of a US and Russian nuclear war, and of course, we got DEF CON 5 here. Now, in this game, you play as an operative who needs to use, I guess, Ronald Reagan's Star Wars defense missile system to shoot down warheads. It's kind of depressing, really. Here's the only non-game that I picked up, and, well, no surprise, it's called Rock and Roll Studio. Basically, as far as I can tell, this is like Apple's GarageBand, but like 30 years earlier. And check out that guy on the cover. I mean, he looks right out of, I don't know, like Rick Springfield's band or something like that. Next up, we have Speedball. This is a futuristic sports title, and I gotta be honest, actually, the sequel to this game is one that I played a ton. Never actually owned the original, so this is very cool. What makes these sports titles stand out to me is that you can tell that they spend a lot of time playtesting and balancing these games. And they're really, I would say, newbie friendly. You don't have to, be into sports games to really dig these. I love it. And like any good Commodore 64 release, you gotta have a poster in the box. Oh yeah. Here is Rick Dangerous. A lot of people love this game. This is a platforming game that has over 100 screens, and as you can tell, it's definitely inspired by Indiana Jones. Here is a game I played a ton as a kid, and I'm laughing because I never actually owned it before. Yes, there was a lot of piracy on the Commodore, so now I actually own a physical copy of Airborne Ranger. I don't know if you guys remember this, but I actually did a home movie with the same name. And that's because my buddy and I, Mike, we love this game so much, we had to shoot a home movie. Yeah, it's a thing that you did. Here is one a lot of Commodore fans are going to recognize. That is Echelon by Access Software. This is a space combat simulator with wireframe graphics. Now, I know I say this a lot, but this is considered to be a groundbreaking game for the time, and it's still highly sought after today. Xenophobe by Microplay is one of many games in the 1980s to be inspired by the Aliens movie franchise. This is a side-scrolling platforming game, and to be quite honest, I haven't played it much yet. Yes, Frankie Goes to Hollywood. Yes, it is a game based on the band from the 1980s. Do you remember that song, Relax? Yeah, it's actually a good song, and it's probably one of the weirder games out there, although, shockingly, this is actually a great game and highly sought after. Also in the box comes a second audio cassette containing a live mix of the band's hit, Relax. Here is another game that a lot of people are going to recognize. That is Elite by Firebird. Now, I know I'm saying this a lot, but basically this is another groundbreaking open universe space travel game. What's cool about this is that it also mixes combat simulation with business trading simulation and kind of just lets you do whatever you want. And keep in mind, those wireframe 3D graphics, I know they're not impressive today, but at the time they really pushed the hardware. Also, just the size of this game was massive. There were 8 galaxies to explore. And I was surprised to see in this box this Dark Wheel novel. Kind of a nice little bonus, especially if you're into this game and into this universe. Here is the blue box that is very familiar to people who collect Rainbird games. This is the game Tracker. This is a 3D strategy game about an ultraviolet TV show in the future. And then check out Artura, which is a side-scrolling platformer within the King Arthur mythology. But look at that cover. Oh man, I mean, that would just make a great album cover, wouldn't it? And this game is so complex, it comes with this massive map to help you get through it. Here is another classic on the Commodore 64, that is Sid Meier's Pirates by Microprose. I played this a ton back in the day. The goal of this game is simple, it's right there in the title. You live your life as a pirate and then you want to retire with as much gold, land, and notoriety as possible. It's also worth noting that this game was remade for the PSP. Here is an odd game I'd never seen before called Zzz. Like 4 Z's, but check out that packaging. Kind of cool. The developer Cinemaware really pushed technology on the Commodore 64, and here is one of their games. It's called Rocket Ranger. This game has Nazis, time travel, and jetpacks. It's basically a mix of action sequences mixed with really cool cinematics. Many of you recognize this game because it came out on the original Nintendo. However, in that version, all the references of Nazis in World War I were removed. And then here's a bit of an odd game called The Three Stooges. And the reason why I say that is because, I don't know about you, but I didn't look at the TV show or the movies and go, oh, that'd make a great game. But Cinemaware always did things a little different. Here's another game I knew nothing about when I bought this lot, and I gotta be honest, I still don't know anything about Masters of Time, other than it has a really cool cover, so I guess I'll have to check it out. But I do recognize this one. This is Beyond Castle Wolfenstein. This is a really early top-down stealth/action game. In the game, you want to kill Hitler by sneaking and bribing other guards to get yourself closer to the Fuhrer and hopefully take him out. These next two games I want to show because they had interesting packaging. Here is Bionic Commando by Capcom, which of course was an arcade game, but for some reason it came in this really sturdy clamshell. And here is a copy of Temple of Apshai, which is one of the probably earliest RPGs I ever played on the system. And again, it comes in a really sturdy clamshell. Very different than all the others. Notice this one has room for cassettes. Beyond the Black Hole has some of the coolest packaging and extras in this entire video. Check this out. Notice how the black hole goes all the way from the front of the box to the back, and the guy's tie is being sucked through it. Inside the box you have some curious things, including the manual, and all the photos are in 3D. It's that red and blue 3D, and of course they have to give you the glasses for that. Dig a bit deeper into the box and you see a second pair of glasses. Notice one of the lenses is darker than the other. This creates a pseudo 3D effect in the game itself. Here is a curiously large box. Typically Commodore boxes are not quite this big, and it's called the Marvelous Marvel Madness. When you pop it open, you notice that there are 3 separate games in here. I think it's kind of funny that each of the games are packaged in these Ziploc bags, almost like shareware back in the day. And it wouldn't be right to talk about games from the 1980s and not include a couple Infocom text adventures. I have 2 of them here. Let's start with Cutthroats. Infocom always jazzed up their text adventures with really cool packaging, and this is no exception. I like how you open it up and immediately you get into the manual with lots of pictures and backstory. This particular game has you playing as a scuba diver looking for sunken treasure, so of course one of the feelies is a little novel about 4 specific shipwrecks. And then I have Spellbreaker. Now, fans of Infocom are going to recognize this game as the conclusion to the Enchanter series, which is within the Zork universe. Open up the game and you have a great looking manual like the previous one, and then a little deeper, you've got these playing cards. All right, guys, those are the pickups I found fairly recently on Craigslist. Yes, Craigslist is not dead. I was really thrilled to see that there was an ad for this massive haul of games on Craigslist. You just never see that. And so, actually, to be honest, Andy, the guy who was selling all this stuff, he actually had many, many more games. I actually couldn't buy them all because he was trying to sell his entire collection of Commodore 64, Amiga games, VIC-20 games. It was epic. And so he gave me a hell of a deal. He sold me all of these for about $5 a piece, and so I want to give a huge shout out to Andy. I'm hoping to go back and potentially get some more games from him because, like I mentioned, he's got a bunch of stuff in his garage, and so that was very cool that he hooked me up. Again, Craigslist is not dead. I mean, there's a lot of competition out there, but occasionally you do get very lucky, and I'm so thrilled to have those in my collection now. Andy, they are in a good home, and I really appreciate it. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing, and take care. You know, at the end of making this video, I'm again blown away by Infocom and their text adventures. I know they're not very interesting to look at, but Man, they covered a lot of ground. I mean, they had fantasy games, horror games, sci-fi, comedy, thrillers, adult theme games, detective stories, and yes, even games about scuba diving for sunken treasure. It's crazy what Infocom did back in the day. It's really cool stuff.